Good to have you with us. Trucking the Truth Across America. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. No gibberish and no nonsense, just common sense right here. Good to have you with us. Congressman, 3rd District, Bobby Scott, joining us right now. Congressman, you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Great to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
Hey, now we're really excited about your town hall meeting tomorrow. I was going to go to Washington until I found out that you had a town hall meeting. And now I'm fired up because it's in Chesapeake. Bobby Scott doing a town hall meeting in Chesapeake. It's at the Indian River Community Center right on Greenbrier Road in Chesapeake. Bobby Scott coming to Chesapeake. We're fired up. I'm going to be there.
Old Greenbrier Road.
Old Greenbrier Road. It's 5 minutes from my house. I could walk there. I'm so excited.
All right.
Everybody's got to turn out for this.
We've been having town hall meetings. It's not anything to get really excited about. We have town hall meetings all the time.
I know, but you're having it in Chesapeake right by my house.
Well, okay. Sounds good to me.
So that's why I'm excited. Plus, I live in your district. I had to move out of Don's. I just couldn't deal with it. So I'm happy to. I'm your constituent now. Aren't you excited?
Oh, now I've got to be nice to you.
That's true, Congressman Scott. Okay, we got a lot to talk about. Let's start with the neocons and the warmongers, rattling sabers all over the place. Let's start with the president's move in Syria, 59 Tomahawk missiles or 57 Tomahawk missiles going on that Syrian air base in order to send a message. Right move, wrong move, why?
Well, it seems like a proportional response to the chemical weapons. The problem is that we're not sure how it fits into an overall strategy. And what's next, and it also reminds us that he did not get congressional authorization for this. There's some question about whether a 15-year-old authorization of military force is still valid. I think it's absurd to have passed it 15 years ago, and people still refer to it as a carte blanche for the president to do whatever he wants. Now, the fact that he hadn't gotten congressional authority, I think, makes it clearly illegal. But the last 8 presidents have done the same thing, and Congress hadn't complained. So I think at this point, if Congress is going to step up to its constitutional responsibilities, it ought to give the president notice that we're going to be serious about our responsibilities. I think Tim Kaine has been one of the most vocal advocates for getting back to the time when if the United States is going to attack another nation, that they need congressional authority, and we just haven't done it. We need to do it, but like I said, it's nothing new. But we need to find out what the overall strategy is, whether or not there'll be more strikes, what the international response has been. But at this point, it seems like it's appropriate.
Well, Congressman, you're right. And just in this past week, if you look at the trio, just let's take 3 legislators from Virginia all saying the same thing about re-upping the AUMF. For people that don't know that acronym, that's the authorization for a military force. Basically, the executive branch is operating on the one that got implemented in 2001. That's 16 years ago, 3 administrations ago. But just in the past 3 days on my show here, the Senator Tim Kaine has called for it. Now, he's done that since he's been in there, since he got elected. You're doing it today. Rob Whitman did it last week. You can't get 2 people that are more ideologically divergent than yourself and Whitman, both calling for the same thing, but it never happens. So what exactly has to happen? What does Congress have to do in order to get President Trump to go to Congress and say, I need to re-up AUMF and make the argument? What does Congress have to do, Congressman Scott?
Well, the first thing you can do is to repeal the old authority, which at some point you would expect would have expired. I mean, you can't amend the Constitution with a resolution. We need to step up, repeal the old one, and then work on a new one if that's what everybody wants to do. But we have to. One of the things about an authorization is that you have a debate, you have a discussion. You get the people behind you because people, if congressmen are going to vote for or against the authorization, they have to explain why they're voting that way, and so you get the people involved, and not just that's not the president's decision; it's the nation's decision.
So, but again, just in simplistic terms, does Paul Ryan have to get involved? I mean, why can't we get this on the floor of the House? Why can't we get this where we can debate it? Why does it just sit there?
Well, you'll have to ask the majority floor leader why he won't bring such a thing to the floor. It really ought to go to it ought to have some committee consideration. So you might have hearings. If there's no time crunch, you could have hearings where you could have expert witnesses explain exactly why you should or should not, and have a committee vote, and then bring it to the floor for a full House consideration. But I can tell you that it's convenient for members of Congress not to have to do it, because if it goes well, you can say I was for it all along, and if it goes badly, what's wrong with the president? There are political advantages in not having to take a vote, but I think the process of having the nation behind military action, I think, is more important than politicians getting a free ride.
Isn't that just a dereliction of duty, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's why some of us think it's time to just step up and have the debate and make the decision.
It's just the whole thing is outrageous. I don't blame Trump. I didn't blame Obama. I wouldn't have blamed Clinton, because the executive branch is going to take whatever opportunity is provided to them in order to not get Congress involved in anything. I mean, that's the way that's the way the government works. So it's up to Congress to simply say, look, you no longer have the authorization, and if you want to send troops or get involved, come to Congress and make your case, which they don't want to do. And as you said, Republican leadership doesn't want to get involved either, because then they actually have to come down on the record, which to me, it's why everybody hates politics to such an extent. So hopefully you can get this straightened out. Let's go to North Korea, where moving an armada led by the aircraft carrier Carl Vinson to the Korean peninsula, followed by several destroyers. And what is the plan here, Congressman, in your judgment?
Well, nobody knows what the plan is right now. Part of the problem is we don't know exactly what's going on in North Korea. They had another test. It was unsuccessful, but every test they learn a little bit more and get closer to the goal of having weapons that can attack the continental United States. If he continues, that creates a real problem. I think right now it appears that we're working very closely with China, and that coalition has the potential, I think, of turning things around. But if he insists on continuing to develop nuclear weapons, I don't know what choice we have.
When you say what choice we have,
well, I mean, you have to respond.
Would a response include going in there and taking some type of military action?
I don't think you can take anything off the table.
And so before we did that, let's get back to the AUMF. I mean, here's what the other people say. They say, well, why would we go to Congress and basically lay out exactly what we were going to do? I mean, then they have time to prepare everything else. That takes all the element of surprise away. So why would you go to Congress and outline what your objectives are?
Well, if it is a defensive action, that is, we're responding to a clear and present danger, threat. I don't think anybody believes that the president needs any authority for that. And so you're in a real sensitive situation where if they get to the point where they are a real present threat, And my sense is the president has authority to do whatever needs to be done. If it's not a clear and present threat, then we have time to debate it.
Do you believe it is right now, based on what you've heard and seen?
Today,
yes.
No, but I mean, if it keeps going, I mean, at some point, it does create a present danger. I mean, having if he were to develop nuclear weapons, I think that would be a threat to the United States.
Okay, let's get to domestic policy. Have you had any conversation with the Trump administration about a potential either tax reform plan or an infrastructure plan, sir?
No. I think they're working on the tax reform. One of the complications is they expected to repeal the Affordable Care Act and repeal it in such a way that saves some money that could help fund the fund tax cuts. They've talked about a border adjustment tax to create some funds to offset some tax cuts, but that is getting very mixed reviews. Depending on whether you're an exporter or an importer, you got winners and losers, and the losers are not particular about the border adjustment tax. So I think they're in a state of maybe even confusion. They're back to wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act again. They've got the last thing we did before we left was to consider, I guess, passing passing a rule, the Rules Committee, considering additional things that they could consider. We didn't take a floor vote on anything, but they're lining things up to consider. But I mean, they haven't gotten around the problem with the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and their replacement. Their replacement, whatever you think of the Affordable Care Act, the replacement is demonstrably worse on every measure. 24 million people, 24 million more people uninsured. Your costs are going to go up, and your insurance policy will be worth less. Now, the fact that they even called a vote on something like that is surprising. Who would want to vote for something like that?
Right.
But they say the repeal didn't pass. It wasn't because Trump couldn't close the deal or Ryan couldn't get the votes or the Freedom Caucus. The reason the thing didn't pass is that people read the bill. They noticed that on every measure it was demonstrably worse than the Affordable Care Act, and people just weren't willing to go backwards. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leaders of the House and Senate, have said consistently, if you want to improve the Affordable Care Act, let us know and we'll work together to try to improve it. We'll do, but if you're trying to make it worse, we're not going halfway on 24 million people uninsured. Would you just make it 12 million more uninsured? No, we're not going to help you do that. But if you want to improve, if you want to reduce the cost, you want to insure more people, if you want to improve the quality of the insurance, we're willing to work. And we've said that from the beginning. But so far, the first order of business is to go backwards, and the replacement, I think, being demonstrably worse, just anything that you're going to get bipartisan support on.
Well, so, look, it was a lousy bill, right? We both agree on that. That's why it's got no traction. It didn't get any traction. And what improvements could they make? I mean, look, at the end of the day, they're not going to get any Democratic votes anyway, and I don't want you to handicap how your opposition caucus runs.
Well, wait a minute. No, we'll have a ton of Democratic votes if you're trying to improve it. My guess is somewhere upwards of 150 Democratic votes if there is an improvement.
In what you're saying, if they try to improve it in lieu of repealing it and replacing it.
Right.
Well, isn't that semantics?
Or repeal it and replace it with something better.
With something better, right? So they could repeal it and just get a better bill.
Right. And after 7 years of trying, you see what they came up with.
Well,
this, as the president said, this is complicated.
I think it was 7 hours, not 7 years. I don't think they ever did any real work
No. I
on
mean,
it.
they've been complaining about the Affordable Care Act for 7 years.
Right.
And they've been talking about every campaign since the passage has included a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And after 7 years of whining and complaining and getting standing ovations at rallies, they finally came up with their alternative, and it was demonstrably worse on every measure. I mean, if they want to come up with something that's better, my guess is somewhere around 150 Democratic votes would be there.
Okay,
they would need about a third of the Republicans, and Democrats would supply the rest of the votes necessary to pass the bill.
Do you have any expectation that the scenario that you laid out, Congressman Scott, could actually happen?
Well, part of the problem is they haven't shown any ideas that improve it. And quiet as it's kept, John, the reason they're having trouble is that the Democratic plan was the single-payer plan. Mm-hmm. We didn't have enough votes to pass it, and so we went with the Republican alternative, essentially modeled after Romney Care.
Right.
The Affordable Care Act has all the good Republican ideas in it. That's what they haven't come to grips with. Mm-hmm. If you go to the Heritage Foundation and look for all the good Republican ideas on health care, they're already in the Affordable Care Act. And they can't come up with any new ones. And that's their challenge.
So basically, I don't think they're going to do anything else with it in 2017. And I think the president's threat to not go forward with a $7 billion in funding for the subsidies, I just think that's an empty threat. He's not going to do that because
and I think
he's not going to do that.
Part of the reason I don't think he's going to do it is he's already been called on it. When he says that the Affordable Care Act will implode, the CBO, when they evaluated the new plan, indicated that there is no stability problem with the Affordable Care Act now. I mean, there are a few challenges, but it's in good shape for years to come. Now, you can sabotage the Affordable Care Act. And if he sabotages, there are a number of ways. You mentioned some subsidies to protect against unforeseen risks on the insurance companies. They said if they don't, and that's part of the bill, that stabilization fund. If you don't make the stabilization payments or the subsidy payments, the insurance companies may pull out.
Congressman, I've only got a couple of minutes, but I've got to ask you this. Representative Ed Royce, yesterday, he's the chairman, as you know, the Foreign Affairs chair. I thought he said something fascinating, and I really want to get your take on it. He said, look, we can do all the saber rattling we want with North Korea, but all we have to do is to cut off all the banks that do business with them. If they don't have access to hard cash, they can't get the technology, and we simply choke them off.
I think that's another reason we have to work with China, because if we both do it, I think that he's absolutely right. If we do it but China doesn't, then they can get access to capital. But I don't want to miss the point that I was making before I got cut off, and that is that if the president knows how to sabotage the Affordable Care Act, and if he does things to affirmatively sabotage it, he can cause problems. Then, if it doesn't work, it's on him. It's not on the Affordable Care Act. And that's why I don't think he's going to do it.
I don't think he's going to do it. I think it's part of his negotiating tact, just like he sent those tweets out against the Freedom Caucus. The majority of those people and their supporters represent his base. This is just part of his negotiation, so he's trying to see what's going to work. I don't see any scenario where he would withhold the $7 billion in funding for the subsidies. I mean, the whole thing would basically collapse the next day, and he would be blamed. So,
and it will be on him. It will not be on the Affordable Care Act. It will be on him for sabotaging it.
Yeah, because he did something to stop. I mean, if it were just to collapse on his own, then there'd be some argument where he could say, look, I tried to fix it. It's just bad, and et cetera.
They tried it last December where they cut off the advertising, and so fewer people actually sign up. That was sabotage, because the people at the last minute who are signing up are the young people who procrastinate, or healthy people that aren't sure they need insurance. The sick people bought insurance right on the first day, but the last few to sign up are young, tend to be young and healthy. And to the extent that they don't sign up, it means the insurance pool is sicker and therefore more expensive. I think people explained to him what he was doing, and he put some of the money back in. But, I mean, he knows that there's things you can do to sabotage the Affordable Care Act, and we need to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, I've only got a half a minute. I need a prediction. Who's going to win the Democratic gubernatorial primary? Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam or your former colleague Tom Perriello?
Ralph Northam, but I've already endorsed Ralph, and I believe he's going to win.
All right, that was kind of half a disclaimer there.
Well, it would have been half a disclosure. You mean my niece is his campaign chairman? You want the full disclosure?
Your niece is his campaign chairman. That was kind of hedging your bet, though. Yeah, he's going to win, but my niece's campaign chairman.
No, I think he's going to win. Tom will run a good race, but I think Ralph, as former lieutenant governor, working with the members of the General Assembly, and as a former member of the Senate, where he worked very well across the aisle, I think it's the exact kind of person you need as a governor.
Okay, Bobby Scott, showing the lieutenant governor some love. That's very nice, Bobby. He really needs it. Maybe you should call him up and try to inspire this campaign he's running, because we, for the life of us,
okay, he's a brain
out.
Surgeon. But that's what we need, somebody who'll just do a good job. What's wrong with that?
I agree with you there, but his campaign is so uninspiring. You got to go fire him up. I tell you what, tell him to come to your town hall meeting in Chesapeake. That'll be fun. By the way, Bobby holds Chesapeake Town Hall meeting, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., Indian River Community Center, 2250 Old Greenbrier Road in Chesapeake. It's right by my house, and I'm going to be there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Bobby Scott coming to Chesapeake, to the south side of Chesapeake. Thanks for being there, sir.
All right.
We're fired up.